Hello, welcome to the second of my series of 3 introductory videos, the first being on craniosacral biodynamics. This one is on continuum movement, and the third one will be on prenatal and birth psychotherapy and psychology. So continuum movement, this is in a way the most challenging to describe, even though all the things that I do are a bit weird, a bit unusual, and often need to be described. Continuum, you might say, is by definition and by design weird. It is very much about going deeper than and beyond our various habits and patterns in life. So in that language is all patterns and much of it habits. How do we describe it in language? The easiest thing for me to do would be to just do some with you, and my intention is to do a little bit at the end. But first I want to say just a little bit about how I came to this incredible work, which, by the way, is the work developed by Emilie Conrad. Unfortunately, I need to say the late Emilie Conrad. Emilie was my dear mentor. She just passed away in April, just short of her 80th birthday. And what she left in her wake was an incredible practice that has changed so many of us that have been involved with it, probably all of us. So I was actually introduced to Continuum back in 1993. Can't believe that's 22 years ago. That's amazing. And I wasn't interested at the time. I was introduced to it in the first year, I think it was the first semester of my dance movement psychotherapy training. I had gone to graduate school to get a master's in dance movement psychotherapy at the Naropa Institute in Boulder, Colorado. And one of our classes, the first year, involved each of us leading the rest of the class in some kind of movement work that we had experienced. Someone in the class had taken her first weekend workshop with Emilie Conrad and tried to teach us some continuum. She introduced us to what she called, as I recall, a continuum exercise. Well, I now know there are no continuum exercises, in that continuum is an inquiry. It's not an exercise per se, but people often think of it as exercise. It has many of the positive, beneficial effects of exercise. But what happened to me in that little exploration was I got a headache. I don't remember what we did, but it didn't feel good to me at all. And I said, I'm never doing this again. That's it. No continuum for me. I laugh now because if you know me, you know I'm totally passionate about continuum. It's one of my absolute favorite things in life. And I practice it every day and I teach it whenever I get a chance. I love spreading the word about it. So I wasn't into it at the time and I resisted it for years. I had friends who were doing continuum. People would say to me all the time, Cherionna, why aren't you doing continuum? You would love continuum. You're already doing continuum. You must do continuum. And I kept saying, no, don't think so. And then something happened. It's actually 10 years ago. At the end of 2004, I met someone who was a continuum teacher. And I just thought she was an amazing person. And I felt like, if this is continuum, I need to do continuum. So I began to search for continuum. I was living in Santa Barbara, California at the time, and I found someone who was teaching some classes, and it was amazing. And she was telling me how I needed to go meet Emilie. Emilie Conrad, her studio was in Santa Monica, LA, Los Angeles. When I had moved to Santa Barbara from Colorado, I had promised myself I would never drive to LA. But I found myself feeling more and more of a sense of urgency that I needed to meet Emilie. And if I didn't, I felt like I was going to die. It felt that strong. And I think it may have been true. I can tell you more about that another time. But definitely a new life started for me when I finally gave in to this internal pressure. I felt I had to go see Emilie. And I drove to Santa Monica. I arrived there shaking, having driven on the freeway. And I completely melted in the class. And I was absolutely fascinated by everything Emilie was saying and doing. It was unlike anything I'd ever done. And I'd done many, many kinds of body work, movement work. I'm a movement therapist. I'd done a master's degree in that, and I'd done many things leading up to that. I'd done lots of breath work and a lot of therapy on myself. This took me somewhere I hadn't been before, and that entranced me. Emilie entranced me, I think. I fell totally in love with Emilie and with Continuum, and studied very intensively with her. I ended up moving to Santa Monica, me moving to Los Angeles. That was something I had never imagined. Only Emilie could have gotten me to drive to Santa Monica and to live there. But I lived there and did just about everything she was doing until 2010 when I moved to the UK and did my best to continue working with her after that. And she approved me as a teacher of Continuum in 2007, which felt bigger to me than getting my PhD. It changed my life. Continuum has changed my life, and I've seen it change the bodies and lives of many other people, which is why I am so passionate about it. So what is Continuum? Not easy to say in a few words, or in any words actually, but in its simplest form, I can say that Continuum movement is about deepening under our habits, our patterns, our everyday ways of being. Emilie would say our fetch wood, carry water ways of being, and to something prior to that, something deeper than that, something that provides us with more options. We ask a question in Continuum, what else? What else is possible? We use in Continuum different kinds of breaths, sounds that are vocalized sounds, usually directed into the tissues of the body, and movement, and awareness. I actually consider Continuum more of a mindfulness practice than a movement practice per se, because often the movement is extremely subtle. So I don't know if you can see this on the camera. Try to have my hands be visible here as well. But a very slight movement. Takes me out of words. So Emilie was an absolutely brilliant person as far as I could tell, and she was a visionary. And she received these different breaths and sounds and movements, the things that we do in Continuum. And really, I think her understanding of it, much of it, just came to her. She developed Continuum over almost 50 years, starting in the 60s, I believe. And she was surprised by how it developed. So she had a background in dance and had experienced deep, intrinsic, fluidic rhythms when she did Haitian dance and spent time in Haiti as a young woman. And she was looking for how to translate that into the modern Western world. How could people in America, she was from New York, how could people in America do this? How could people in the West access that? I've heard Emilie describe Continuum as an inquiry into our fluid nature, and that we're made up mostly of water. What's that about? And how can we access that? How can we benefit from that? How often do you feel fluid in your life? In our modern Western lives, we're so sped up and busy and focused and distracted that we often don't feel fluid. Yet we are. We're made up of fluid. One of Emilie's quite brilliant ideas, I think, was her concept of 3 tissue anatomies. What she discovered over her years of exploration of our fluid nature was that our tissues literally change their shape and their consistency, their way of being in different states depending on context. So an intention of Continuum is to shift the context for our tissues, which can shift many things. She talked about the cultural anatomy as being the way our tissues are in everyday fetch wood, carry water life. So when we're rushing to get somewhere, when we're looking at our computer, when we're typing or possibly reading or talking on our mobile phones, all the things we do in our lives, driving, it's all sped up. And what happens with our tissues is that they literally get more dense and more narrow, and our focus gets more narrow. We're limited in terms of what we can access in that state, although we may get something done. But it's at a cost in that sped up, compressed state. What Emilie found is that using the different breaths and sounds in Continuum, we can start to slow down. And watch what happens to my body as I do this. We start to slow down. We start to soften. Our tissues get softer. They literally become less dense. And often they start to float into the air as they literally become lighter. We do a lot of Continuum lying on the floor, and it's not unusual to see arms and legs floating up into the air. It's not about lifting them up. We seem to be using our muscles in different ways in Continuum than in our normal lives. We seem to be supported by something. And what happens as we slow down is we drop into this deep, fluidic state where our movement is much more fluid. It's more about curves, pulsations, waves. And it's more of a whole body experience. And it relates to the midline of the body. We can sense our midline being part of it rather than just moving arms and legs. The whole body is moving together. It's very much like being a little embryo. So I find in Continuum and in teaching Continuum, my experience with prenatal psychology and embryology really easily come into this work. So we start to embody those early states. It's not about embodying the history from when we were little embryos. It's not about going into our trauma or our history. Those are patterns and habits. It's about accessing our potential. I'm actually writing a book about this right now, which I'm excited about. It's called Fluid and Cosmos, Accessing our original embryological potential. Accessing our original embryological potential. If you listen to my video on craniosacral biodynamics, you'll recognize this is about accessing the biodynamic forces, the universal forces that form us. Then in Continuum, we can deepen even further, which we also do in biodynamics, by the way. As we slow down even further, we enter into what Emilie called the cosmic anatomy. And in this state, it's not as much about fluid as it is about space, ether. We're being suspended, supported. I'm going to just move back a bit here so you can see my arms. My arms are being held up. They're being supported, suspended in the field around me. It's a field phenomenon. In Continuum, we call this the cosmic anatomy. Biodynamics, we talk about the long tide. And this involves widening further, deepening into our energetic essence. This is an incredibly nourishing state. Very slow, very spacious, more restful than probably anything you can imagine, which is why it's helpful to do so. There's much more I could say about Continuum, and I'm hoping you will submit some questions and inspire me to speak more about it. I think what I'd like to do right now, just to keep this as short as possible, is invite you to try a little. So in Continuum, we use different kinds of breaths and sounds, as I said, and movements. Usually we'll do something, and then we listen in what we call open attention, simply being with what our experience is after having done whatever it is we do. It's like doing scientific research. So if I apply this or if I change the context in this way, what happens? And it may be that we experience movement. Often we do. It may be that we experience changing sensations. We may find our tissues begin to soften. We begin to feel wider. Often people feel lighter. And sometimes old trauma, stuff that's held in the body, comes to the surface. And if we continue, it can gently be released. If we focus in on it, we reinforce it. But we just keep asking, well, what else? And we have various ways in Continuum to interrupt patterns as well, but I won't go into that right now. So, simple way to get into Continuum is to make a simple sound. I usually start with humming, because everybody can hum. It's not about sounding good. This is not about projecting your voice, or you're not in a choir, although you may be. And this may be a universal expression here. But what's important is that you're offering the gift to your tissues. So making a simple humming sound, can you sense the vibrations in your body? What do you sense in your body? So like this. You could put your hands somewhere. I could put them on my shoulders because I think you can see them there, but you could put your hands somewhere where you have discomfort. And in Continuum, we tend to think of where the hands are as serving like tuning forks. So the sound or the breath, whatever it is we're doing, will tend to go there. So you can put your hands where you feel like they're needed or where you'd like to put them, and notice what happens. What do you experience? Can help to close your eyes so that you can focus inwards while you make the sound and then while you listen to the response. Let's do one more. After doing the sound for a bit, we take some time in what we call open attention, simply being with what is. And what I'm noticing, I do a lot of this, so my system is very fluid, it's very responsive, and that is an effect of Continuum. Responsiveness, resilience, being able to adapt to what is, being creative. I'm experiencing a kind of tingling all around here in the back of my neck and head, which have been feeling quite tense actually lately. I notice my arms want to just move. You can't see this, but it's moving through my whole body down into my left hip. It's moving my left leg. It's feeling quite good actually. So I want to invite you to play with that yourself. And very simple. You can do it anytime, anywhere, and let me know what happens. If you've done Continuum before, you probably have all kinds of questions and comments that you might like to make. I'd really like to start a dialogue here. And I invite your questions. I love answering questions about Continuum. I find Continuum takes us into such a creative place. Fluidity has to do with letting go of the last moment so that we can be fully present in this moment. And when we're fully present in this moment, open to those fields, energetic fields that support us and that we seem to come from, we have incredible resource available to meet this moment. We can be creative. So I would love to be creative with you and see what we end up talking about in relation to Continuum. So I look forward to what evolves from this. This is kind of like a little Continuum exploration. I've just done something putting out this video, and now I open into open attention and see how the field responds. So I look forward to hearing from you and enjoy. I'll be including some information as well about where you can find out more about Continuum. Thank you.